avoid, the ultra Maoists, right? The people that think China stopped being, became no good when Deng Xiaoping came to power. The people who think that Cuba is the Soviet Union's sugar plantation, and all the Cuban people were slaves of the evil Russians, and the people that push these crazy ultra leftist ideas, and the only revolution they could possibly support are like crazy ultra left extremists like El Sendero Luminoso in Peru. Those folks push a narrative where it's like if you don't say the right magic words, right? If you don't say the right incantations from the Mao's Little Red Book, then you're not a real communist, you're a revisionist. Well, that is not Marxism, that's idealism. That is idealism, right? The idea that if you read the right incantations and you say the right magical words, you're really socialist. But if you don't say the right magical words and the right incantations, you're not really socialist. That is idealism, right? The reality is defined by material. It's not defined by ideas, right? And that, look, for example, look at the capitalist revolution. When France had its capitalist revolution, at first it was an atheist state, right? They converted all the churches to temples of reason. Then after that, Napoleon came back and restored Catholicism. When I earlier talked about the English Civil War, and when Britain had its capitalist revolution, they were fanatical Roundhead Puritans. They had a very different ideology. In Britain, they were fanatical Protestants. In France, they were atheists for a while, and then they became Catholics. But the economic foundations were the same. Post-revolutionary France, capitalist. England, during the English Civil War, capitalist. The economic system was the same, even though the ideas and the ideology being extolled by the governments and by the leaders was different. Ideas do not define reality. Socialism is a property relation. It is not defined by the magical incantations that leaders espouse. And, Gaddafi's Libya. Gaddafi was not a Marxist, you'll have to remember. Gaddafi's Libya was socialist, even though Gaddafi was not a Marxist. He preached Islamic socialism, right? Syria, under the leadership of the Ba'athist Arab socialists. They are a socialist country, but their economic foundations are socialist, but their ideology is not Marxist. They draw from Marx. They're not Marxists. Venezuela, Bolivia, these are socialist countries, right? Nicaragua, but their leaders are not pure Marxists, right? They adopt elements of Christianity, they adopt elements of indigenous practices, they adopt the teachings of Simón Bolívar, but these are socialist countries, right? China, socialism with Chinese characteristics. That socialism is defined by property relations. And it's not defined by whether or not you have the magical correct words. Now, Marxism is very useful because it explains how history works. It explains how the economy works. It's a tool, it's a science that can be utilized in helping the construction of socialism, understanding where the world is going. But Marxism is not a religion. You don't become impure if you stray from the holy teachings of Karl Marx, right? That's not how this works. And that is the problem that the Gang of Four had, and Mao in his late life too, right? That this idea that Marxism is the holy, true doctrine, and that anyone who strays from it thus becomes a revisionist and burns in hell for all eternity for betraying the true teachings of Marx, Lenin, and Mao, that's not scientific thinking, right? If you start thinking that way, you have left the realm of Marxism, and you have entered the realm of idealism and religion, right? And you have turned Marxism, instead of being a scientific tool and a method for understanding the world, you've turned it at that point into a religious device by which you can, you can be religious or something. I mean, there's a pamphlet published during the Cultural Revolution. I'll never forget this. I tried to find it online. I found it in an old communist office, and it made me laugh. It's called The Application of Mao Zedong Thought in Everyday Life. It's sad, right? It's essays by people in China applying Mao Zedong thought to their everyday life. One guy is a bus driver, right? And he talks about how he applies Mao Zedong thought in his driving of the bus, and how if he drives too fast, that's ultra-leftism. But if he drives too slow, it's revisionism, right? And how by applying Chairman Mao's teachings to his driving of his bus, he does it in the most pure Marxist way. This is silliness. Thank you, David, and you're right. Marxism is a guide to action. I'll address that, right? And that you never want to see Marxism, you never want to view Marxism, as a religious doctrine, right? I mean, it's a very, very, very silly pamphlet. But you can see that's why the Cultural Revolution was a disaster for China, is people were thinking about this, right? They were thinking, oh, I better not drive too slow or I'm a revisionist. But if I drive too fast, then I'm an ultra-leftist. I must drive at exactly the right speed to carry out Chairman Mao's true revolutionary line. This is silliness, okay? This is absolute silliness, and don't think that way. If you think that way, I can guarantee you what will happen, and I've seen this many times in my life. I mean, and I'm not that old, but I've seen this. People who start thinking that way, they get into Marxism, they view it that way, right, as this infallible ideology that can have no wrongs and all of that, and pretty soon something comes along and disproves it, and then they turn against communism and they go back and live a normal life. If you view Marxism that way, if you give it that place in your life, it becomes your God. Pretty soon that God will fail, and then you will abandon it, right? And that's the thing. Marxism is a tool. Marxism is a tool and nothing more than that. So the Korean Workers' Party is guided by Marxism, absolutely. Are they revisionists? Well, I mean, they don't adhere to Edward Bernstein's teachings of evolutionary and pro-imperialist socialism, so I don't think that they're followers of revisionist Marxism. Have they strayed from the pure teachings of Karl Marx in some ways? Of course, right? Because in the real world, they are guided by Marxism, sure, but they are not pure in the sense that they're applying it. And no socialist country is. No socialist country is pure. Every socialist country in history engages in political innovation. Every socialist country in history engages in political innovation. So that's the answer to the first Super Chat question.